What is FERPA? FERPA 101 for teachers, and I'm your presenter, Mrs. Lakeisha Moody. So what is FERPA? FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It is a federal law that protects the privacy of student education records. So basically, FERPA was put into place to ensure that student educational records are kept private and kept confidential. FERPA gives parents certain rights with respect to their children's education records. These rights transfer to the student when he or she reaches the age of 18 or attends a school beyond the high school level. So students who are under the age of 18, the FERPA rights are extended to their parents. However, when the student reaches the age of 18, or if a student graduates from high school at the age of 17 or even 16 years old, and then they go on to college, then these FERPA rights are then transferred to the eligible student. FERPA protects the private educational records of students from unauthorized parties. An example of an unauthorized party may be a community organization in which a student may be joining or trying to be a part of, and that organization contacts the school about the child's academic records. Well, the school is not at liberty to release those academic records without written consent from the parent. So that is one example of an unauthorized party. Any information that personally identifies the individual must be kept confidential, and under this provision, third parties have very limited access to the records. So confidentiality is key under the FERPA law. What rights are under FERPA? Parents or eligible students have the right to inspect and review the student's education records maintained by the school. So if a parent or eligible student requests to see his or her cumulative records, assessment records, attendance records, they cannot be denied the right, because under FERPA they do have the right to view these records. Parents or eligible students have the right to request that a school correct records which they believe to be inaccurate or misleading. So a parent or eligible student can request in writing that a record be corrected. However, the school does not have to honor the request. The school can consider the request, and if they deem the request to be a legitimate and accurate request, then they can then change or make corrections within the student's academic or cumulative records. Schools must notify parents and eligible students annually of their rights under FERPA. So every year, parents must be notified of their FERPA rights. Different schools and school districts tend to do it in different ways. Some may elect to use parent handbooks, parent newsletters, or just a basic informational letter which depicts the parents' FERPA rights. However, this does have to be done every year. So what is an educational record? Just about any information maintained by the educational institution that is directly related to the student and is used in the educational process is considered a student educational record. Some examples are personal information, enrollment records, grades, schedules, assessment records. All of these are considered educational records, and they must be kept confidential. So let's think about it. What are some other things that you think that can be considered an educational record? You may pause here and brainstorm. The release of records and rules for disclosure. The most important and number one rule is that schools must have written permission from the parent or eligible student in order to release any information from a student's education record. But of course, there are always exceptions. Exceptions for third-party disclosure. So these are times when the school does not have to have written consent from the parent or the eligible student in order to release information to third parties. The first one is other educators with legitimate educational interest in the student. So when there are other educators who have the same educational interest as the teacher, they do not have to have permission. For example, many times we meet about students during our problem-solving teams, and you have to talk about academic behavior. And so you don't have to have permission to share the information with the problem-solving team because they have the same educational interests as you do. Secondly, disclosure of information is necessary to protect the safety and health of the student. So, for example, if there was some type of outbreak within the school or some other health issue and the health department requested certain student information, then the school would not have to get the parents' permission because this would be a safety or health measure. Thirdly, another school to which a student is transferring. When students transfer, which happens all the time, schools have to get this information in a timely manner, and therefore parents do not have to give their consent in order for this information to be shared. To comply with a judicial order, and lastly, interested parties who are determining a student's financial aid eligibility. So let's think about it again. What are some specific examples where information may be disclosed to a third party? You may pause here to brainstorm. Information that can be released without a student's consent is considered directory information. It consists of information necessary to publish such things as honor rolls, athletic programs, or conduct awards, assemblies. Some examples of some directory information consist of student's name, address, email address, place of birth, class level, and any degrees that have been earned. And even when dealing with directory information, the parent or eligible student still needs to know in a timely manner that this information will be released. And this gives them time that if they do not want this directory information to be released, then they can put into writing a request to not have the directory information released, and the educational institution will have to honor it. Information that can't be released. This is considered non-directory information, and basically it's everything else. Teachers cannot post test scores from the class on a bulletin board, and these are just some common errors that some teachers may make throughout a daily teaching routine. As I said, teachers cannot post test scores, and many times teachers do put up motivational bulletin board, but when you put up bulletin boards that share students' test scores, then it's making it visible to other students, to other parents, and anyone else who may enter your classroom or the school building, and this is a breach of the student's confidentiality, and therefore in a violation of the Ferpa law. Secondly, teachers cannot ask another student to distribute graded papers to the class. Graded papers cannot be stacked in a box for students to go through and take their papers. So as a practice, it's best for teachers to have a confidential place to put graded papers, because many times teachers are doing different things throughout the day, and if you're grading papers and you leave them on the table or you leave them on your desk, you never know who may enter the classroom. A parent can enter the classroom, or someone else can enter the classroom and have access to student grades or other academic information. So we just have to be very mindful and careful of putting our academic records, out of the view of others who enter into the classroom. Lastly, parent volunteers cannot grade students' work, and basically parent volunteers cannot interact with any educational records, because this, once again, would be in violation of the Ferpa laws. The basic rule is any non-directory information cannot be revealed without the prior consent from the eligible student or the parent. A few tips to avoid trouble. 1. Never leave a computer unattended when a student record can be viewed with the click of a mouse. So as a practice, if you're working with different with the educational records, with inputting grades, before you leave the computer, make sure you log off or make sure you close that particular program down, because you once again, you never know who may enter, or another student may approach your computer and click on the mouse and have access to those private records. Secondly, printed documents that contain a student's personal information should be shredded once they are no longer needed. Don't discuss student situations in the lounge with staff who simply have a need to know. Only share information with those who have a need to know and who have proper authorization. And what it means by proper authorization is many times teachers share students. The student has a homeroom teacher. The student may also go to the speech teacher, or the student may go to the EL teacher, and therefore these teachers may have to discuss academic, behavior, or attendance information as it relates to the student. However, this is a confidential conversation, and as I mentioned earlier, it should not be a conversation that should be had within the teacher lounge, because this information can easily get, from one teacher to the next teacher. Then a parent may be in the building and then also be able to listen to this confidential information. So teachers just have to be very careful on what they say and who they say it to and where it's being said, in order not to violate the FERPA laws. Lastly, never discuss school information about students while attending social events. So even if you're talking to a proper, someone who is authorized to know about the student, a football game would not be an appropriate place, because you don't know who else may be listening. And remember, the conversation should be confidential. So let's think about it again. So what are some other things that you could do to avoid trouble and not violate the FERPA laws? You may pause here to brainstorm. In general, use common sense and your best judgment to comply with the FERPA rules. Remember, student confidentiality is very important. Remember what you say, think about who you're saying it to. Also think about if these people are authorized to even receive the particular information. And as it says, just use your common sense and your best judgment. Once again, I am Lakeisha Moody. If you have any questions, you can contact me at lmoody@jeffcoed.com.